So I'm glad you're here, and thank you for your interest. Thank you for everyone who came out tonight. In the 1930s, in Germany, there was a young pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer who became very, very concerned about what he was seeing in his country. And he became very concerned about his government and a new person who was rising to power named Adolf Hitler. And he tried to get his fellow pastors and Christians, believers, to be interested and to speak out. And so there were about 3,000 pastors who did in fact speak out, and they even signed a statement expressing their concern. But there were about 12,000 other pastors who did not. And kind of the overlying attitude was, you know, we're Christians, and really we're supposed to be quiet. We are supposed to get along with people. We're supposed to be submissive to our government. And it's really not our place to get involved in politics, basically. Well, you all know how that story ended, right? It was a really, really poor decision on the part of the church. And I tell you that story because for me personally, I would not be part of the Republican Party of Texas were it not for our very, very strong Judeo-Christian foundation. Amen. Right? Yes. So, from the outset, you know where I stand. You know where everything that I'm going to tell you and encourage you to do is coming from. And I'll be honest with you, I believe that we are at a very critical place in our state and in our nation. And I don't think there is any human person who can save us. I believe it will be the grace of God to get us through the challenges that we face. But I believe He has given us hands and feet and a mouth. And we are, in fact, supposed to speak out for liberty and righteousness. And so that's why I have entitled the presentation I'm currently giving on our legislative priorities, The Fight for Liberty and Righteousness, because that's literally what I believe that we are fighting for, right? And I'm glad you agree with me. Thank you. All right, so what did our founders intend? Two of my very favorite quotes. One is from Benjamin Franklin, and you probably know the story. After signing the Constitution, he walks out, and a lady on the street asked him, "What kind of government have you given us?" And what was his reply? A republic. A republic if you can keep it. And we still are fighting to keep our republic today, right? We are not a democracy, we are a representative republic. The other quote that I think is really apropos for our times is by John Adams, and it says, "Human passions, unbridled by morality and religion, would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net." Our Constitution was made for whom? You probably know this one too. Whom was it made for?
Moral and religious people.
A moral and religious people. Where does morality come from? Is there any morality apart from God?
No.
And He has given it to us in the form of, I believe, the Old Testament, our Judeo-Christian scriptures. And that is what defines our morality. And so for other people, they may try to pull morality out of the air or borrow from our morality, but we have a standard outside of ourselves. So that's one thing that gives me confidence, because you're not just getting my opinion. You're getting some of my opinion, but I really, really try to strive for having my foundation come from our Judeo-Christian principles, and because I believe our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and our forefathers intended for that to be our foundation. That's the place from which I speak. So let me set that stage for what I want to share with you about our legislative priorities, because I believe we have to have a great big picture, and then we hone down to the particular. So I'm gonna give you my great big picture, and then the hone down, and then at the end I'll be happy to take any questions that you have But let me run through my material first. So that is our foundation. That is where we start. We can all agree on that as Texas Republicans. We may differ over particular issues or how we get there over implementation, but I think it's important and imperative that we all agree on principle. Principle is what defines us as a party. Why is that critical in the world in which we live? So from a global perspective, one thing I really, really encourage you to be familiar with, if you haven't heard of this already, and there are many threats. We have threats from the cartel. We have threats from the Chinese Communist Party. But one of our really current threats is from the World Economic Forum. How many of you are familiar with the World Economic Forum? Okay, great. If you're not familiar, I encourage you to go to their website and read about them. They have a website, and they tell us everything that they intend for us. And so I wanted to just very, very briefly tell you that the forum engages in the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. So these folks, these elites, these global elites, have an agenda for you guys right here in Rockwall. They have an agenda for Austin. In fact, they are firmly entrenched in Austin now, and one of the ways they are firmly entrenched is through the Clinton Global Initiative, who has formed a medical council in Austin. And the reason I found out about this is because I have a very, very wonderful friend that I get to stay with when I go to Austin, so I don't have to rent a hotel while I'm down during session. And her husband happens to be a surgeon. And so he was telling me about this. He said, Jill, he said, we now have this council in Austin that influences us as medical providers, as well as insurance companies, as well as, you know, all the labs, the standalone clinics, everything having to do with the medical industry. This new Clinton Healthcare Global Council has input in and ability to shape policies. And this is not a good thing. This is not a good thing. I thought this was kind of humorous in a dark kind of way. The second paragraph begins with, or the last sentence of the second paragraph says, moral and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything it does, meaning the World Economic Forum. Whose morality, right? Whose morality is influencing them? And yeah, it's Satan. I agree. It's Satan. All right, so just for us as the United States, as a nation, how have we recently been impacted by this? So the Biden administration just a few days ago came out with the Declaration of North America. So our President Biden no, he's not our president. The current White House occupant, let me put it that way. He met with Trudeau. Let me see if I can move this, because I kind of don't like something between me and you guys. He met with Trudeau and the President of Mexico. And I just want to highlight something that this statement says. The leaders are determined to fortify our region's security, prosperity, sustainability, and inclusiveness through and climate change and the environment, competitiveness, listen to this word, migration and development. Migration and development, health and regional security. What does that not imply? Yes, ma'am. Sovereignty, liberty, exactly. They don't want borders. They want us to be one great big old North American region, right? This is a huge current threat to our liberty, and we better be paying attention to it, right? All right. I think this is the one that I'm sorry to do this while you're eating. I really am, but you're warned in advance. I'm really sorry. So the Biden administration, in terms of morality, I think our forefathers would be turning over in their graves But we have a very, very dangerous man who is currently in the office of Assistant Director for Health and Human Services, who dresses like a woman and pretends he is a woman, and he goes on TV and he talks about how our children, those 18 and under, should be allowed to get cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and surgery that removes healthy body parts in order to, quote, change sex. This is a mentally deranged man at best and a criminal pedophile at worst, and he occupies a role in our presidential administration, and that is absolutely unacceptable. It is unacceptable. We did have a deputy assistant in the DOE, and fortunately the police decided they needed to pick him up after he stole multiple suitcases full of women's underwear, and so finally he is out. But I will tell you that there are hundreds more similar to this in the current administration. And so our liberty is threatened. Our standards of morality and what is good for man and woman and boy and girl and our families are at threat. And so we are in a real pickle, right? We are in a real difficult place. So in Texas, let's just keep that thread going. The Democrats in 2019 founded the LGBT caucus. Why is that a problem? The problem is that of those caucus members, 8 of them currently serve as committee chairs on our House committees. And so you wonder why one of our legislative priorities is banning Democrat committee chairs. This is one of the big reasons, because these folks will have absolutely no interest in passing our legislative priorities that have to do with protecting children. It is not because we are haters or bigots or any other kind of pejorative you want to put in there. It's because we care and love our children. And we see our kids and our grandkids being attacked in public school, even in private school in some instances, by Hollywood and by the culture, and their brains are literally being deconstructed because of the nonsense that they are being taught about their identity, right? So this is not okay, and that's why we made such a big stink. That's one of the reasons we made such a big stink about the Dem chair issue. This is the caucus. The ones in red are chairs. It'll be, and this was for last session, it will be interesting. I really hope that Speaker Phelan, at least if we, well, I hope that he now decides. As you know, we lost our plea to try to get the House rules changed so that there could be no Dem chairs. Now it is truly up to Speaker Phelan. It's up to him if he wants to appoint any or not. And so I hope at least he will not appoint any of these folks who would stop those bills. Just as an aside, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but as responsible Republican voters, you should know where money goes. And again, under the category of no Dem chairs and our wanting our Republicans in the House as well as Senate to lead, just make note that Speaker Phelan has donated a lot of money to certain campaigns. And so the question has to be asked, does that representative really have freedom to vote their conscience and vote their district if they're receiving large sums of money from the Speaker? And so that's just something to think about, to discuss with your rep, and I just want to draw that to your attention, but I'm not going to dwell on it. All right, so as a reminder to us, as we get into the legislative priorities, I always do this every time I speak. I love our Republican Party platform. It has been worked on over many sessions by our delegates at State Convention. Rarely is the preamble or the 10 priorities messed with very much, but I did want to point out a tweak we made this last June at State Convention. We added one sentence, and I've highlighted it here in yellow for you. We added the sentence that says, we recognize that human nature is immutable. And the reason we did that is because really for the first time, I think, in our nation's history, we are having to talk about what defines male and female. And so this sentence helps us remember that we believe that human beings are made in the image of God, and that God has a particular design, and that he created us from birth, actually before birth, right? Before birth, male and female, and that we can't change that, and that human nature is immutable. And so human nature may be affected by all kinds of things that happen to us when we're little kids, or traumas, or even some of the foods that we eat. Our food supply is getting so tainted, and so there may be all kinds of environmental factors or relational things that may affect our emotions or our sense of ourself. But God created us immutable. So that is how we tweaked our preamble. And obviously you are familiar with the other things in it that are so good, that we believe in God, that we believe that all men and women are created equal, and that is different from equitable outcomes, right?
Yeah.
We want equal opportunity, but we cannot create equal outcomes. We want people to have dreams, and we want them to be able to pursue those dreams, obviously. We strive to preserve freedom given to us by God. We believe that our human rights are inalienable. They were given to us by God, and that our rights do not come from the government, right? And I'm going to read that sentence because it's so good. We strive to preserve the freedom given to us by God, implemented by our founding fathers and embodied in the Constitution. It's our solemn duty to protect innocent life, develop responsible citizens. We believe in free market principles, and that we must maintain our sovereignty. So, we have a great preamble, and then we've got 10 principles. And we didn't mess with these principles at State Convention either, except to do one thing, and that is we added a word. So principle number 3 used to read, preserving Texas and American sovereignty and freedom. We added the word individual. And the reason that we did that is because in the last 2 years, our individual sovereignty has been threatened by what? By vaccines. That's exactly right. And no human being should be forced to have an injection of a vaccine or a chip or anything else into their own personal body, and we really wanted to make that very clear. So that's why we added that word, and I think that was a really good addition. But other than that, our principles are pretty much the same as what they have been. As you know, we have tons and tons of planks, but our preamble and our principles are the foundation for what we believe in. All right, the legislative priorities. So I'm assuming that most everybody here knows how we get our legislative priorities, so I won't spend much time on that, but they're decided. They start at the precinct level because we're always about we the people, right? We always start at the local level, so we encourage people to participate in their precinct conventions in March whenever we have our primaries, and then those resolutions that are passed and passed on up through the process land at our state convention. We have a committee called Legislative Priorities at state convention, and they take all of those that are received all over the state. They go through them all. They look at the ones that are most frequently occurring. They look at the leg priorities that didn't pass last session. They see if people are still interested in those, and obviously I think we have a couple that we didn't get fulfilled last session that are back on here. We have a couple that weren't as big of a deal last time as they are now, and one of them is our border. When, in 2020, Trump was still in office, and we were making some improvements on immigration at the Texas border. Well, that changed in a big way, right? So securing our border now came in terms of our delegates' voting strength at number 2. And I think that is quite appropriate, because if we don't have elections that we can have confidence in, and that there is transparency, and that we know that the person we voted for our vote was counted in that direction, then we have nothing as a country, right? And if we don't have sovereignty, we don't have a country. So those two things, I think our delegates got just right and are incredibly critical. And then we've got banning gender modification in kids, which came in third in 2020 as well. And back then that was kind of a newer priority. A lot of people were just hearing about this phenomenon, but I think even in the past 2 years, it has just exponentially exploded in a very unfortunate way, as we are seeing, and frankly, this is driven by greed. It is driven by pharmaceutical companies and healthcare providers, and I can say that because I'm a retired licensed counselor, but I don't even recognize my profession anymore. It is so off the rails, it's so politicized, and unfortunately, our medical institutions are becoming that way as well. So we've got banning gender modification back on here again, and I do have optimism that we're going to get something on that this session, but we can't take any of this for granted. You would think all of these are no-brainers, but unfortunately we can't take that for granted, so we're going to have to work really, really hard to get it passed. Stop sexualizing Texas kids. This is a newer priority, and largely driven, I think, because parents were seeing during COVID, they were seeing their kids' instruction online and were pretty horrified by what they were seeing, right? And then this phenomena of the drag queens, good grief. Have y'all had one here in Rockwall, a drag brunch or anything? Not yet. Not yet. Good grief. We had one in Little Roanoke, Texas, and we showed up big for that, and then of course Denton, and you know Denton's a college town, and so they do them pretty frequently in Denton. Although I will say one of the places that had it, which was kind of a bar, they went out of business, so we're pretty happy about that, right? Yeah. And then another one recently, they were going to have it, and they were openly saying it's all ages. Well, they just recently changed that advertising and saying 18 only, and I don't like 18 only. I still don't think it reflects values of the communities, but you know, yeah, yeah, there you go. But at least we got kids, you know, prevented from attending that, which was a good thing. So, but don't let your guard down. There, for whatever reason, they are hitting little communities. And it's an attempt to normalize perversion, and it is absolutely abhorrent, and we've got to do something about it. The other thing on Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids that's in that priority that our delegates voted on is to repeal the obscenity loophole, right? Yes. Which has been the way that these library books, these horrible library books that you're seeing list of that are nothing short of pornographic material showing up in school libraries and public libraries. And so we can, if we repeal the obscenity exemption and fix that loophole, then we can take some steps. And then there's other ways. I know there's some ordinances that are being written, and I think we need a brave town to be the first one to implement that ordinance, but there's some other ways I think that we can go about it too. But certainly our delegates put that as a priority. Banning Democrat chairs. Why was this such a big deal? Our delegates know that this is not a piece of legislation that we can get passed, but I think as the last few years, I know Colonel West began talking about it when he was party chair, and Matt Rinaldi has talked about it a lot. And I think there were a lot of just regular Republican voters who had no idea that Democrats were appointed to committees down in Austin in both our Senate and in our House. The Senate has had far fewer Democrat chairs, but I think the Lieutenant Governor just came out with his list, and we have one. And I think he has said that when that person retires, because he's had it for a long time, when he steps down, he will I'm sorry, to run for mayor. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So he will replace that with a Republican. Yeah. But our House has had a number of Democrat chairs appointed in proportion to the votes for Democrat representatives. And you know what? I have a real problem with that, because Republicans won the election, right? That's my number one problem with it, is Republicans won. My number two problem with it is what on earth do you think is going to happen to bills that land in those Democrat-run committees? Our bills are going to get stalled out, so it's an easy way for bills that they want to kill, they can just send them to those committees. The other problem I have is that Democrats fundraise off those chairmanships. So we're indirectly helping them raise money for their next election. And we want to put Republicans in that representative seat, not a Democrat. And so why on earth would we help them raise money? So those are just a few, and there's more reasons. But I think the biggest is that, you know what? We won. We won, right? And it's very interesting. I wish, and we've got some heroes, and I have not lost hope for heroes in our Texas House, but I do want to point out what just happened in Washington, D.C. a few weekends ago. How many of y'all stayed up like I did until like 1:30 in the morning, right? Oh gosh, I was watching my Twitter feed and looking at a couple of sites that I like to watch for political news and seeing what was happening in our house in D.C. because that little group of 20 held out. And it was interesting because I was speaking up in Hunt County the other night, and I got to meet Keith Self. And I said, oh, I just want to hug you because I'm so proud of you for being such a hero. And he goes, well, it's funny. And he told this story to the crowd that was there because he spoke for a few minutes before I did. He said, you know, I wasn't really part of that little group. He said they had a group, and I guess it was kind of unbeknownst to him, that was doing some strategizing and planning on how they were going to fight back to try to get some changes in the House rules. And he said, I wasn't a part of that. He said, I just knew that, you know, that these things were wrong and that we needed to do some things different. And so he said, when they first saw my first vote, and I think he told me he voted for Jim Jordan the first time. He said, when they saw my vote, he said, several of them ran over to me and introduced themselves and said, we had no idea you would vote that way and come join us, please. And so I said, well, that's even more impressive that you would just take it upon yourself to have integrity and to vote, you know, for changing things and taking on the status quo. And so that little group of 20 out of 400, how many House of Representative members are there in D.C. now? 435. Okay, so 20 moved that whole group of 435 more to the right than we have been in decades. Right? Great changes made. I mean, we're supposed to be able to get a vote now on the House floor for term limits. I mean, wow. And I don't know if y'all have seen, okay, I'm just going to tell you, one of my favorite political blogs is the Conservative Treehouse. And they showed a little clip of Kevin McCarthy yesterday talking about not putting a couple of Democrats on the House Intelligence Subcommittee. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, who is this person speaking? Because he was strong, and he was telling the truth, and he was saying, why should we put these people who lied to the American people on our House Subcommittee? And I'm like, go Kevin McCarthy, and I never thought those words would come out of my mouth, right? But he did great. And so I was talking with a friend of mine on the way over here, and she said, you know, it's amazing what one person who takes a stand, or a small group takes a stand, courage can be contagious, right? So my prayer and my hope for our Texas House of Representatives is that courage will be contagious for them, because they can do great things if they will just stand up and do that. And so, let me see what I got next. In terms of the rest of banning Democrat chairs, I've got a couple of pictures, so I'm going to come back to that. Abolishing abortion in Texas, y'all, we did not dream that we would get Roe v. Wade overturned. And so, oh my goodness, that was awesome. And we already had laws on the books to abolish abortion in Texas. And so now what our fight is going to be is by those who want to create loopholes and roll back the gains we've made. And so again, in the wisdom of our delegates, I think it's pretty important this is still a legislative priority. Because some people said, well, did we achieve that and we need to put property tax on there or something else? Well, we can't do that because the delegates already voted. Although, I'm with you, that's a really important one. But this is going to be critical that we still fight for, right? Because they're going to come at us. And the same thing with number 7. Yes, we got permitless carry passed last time, which is great. And then the court decision so that 18 to 21 can purchase guns, carry guns. But we're going to have to fight against, those who wish to roll back and soften some of those liberties. So we will have to fight that. And then, of course, parental rights and education. And this is interesting because the Texas legislature, for 30 years, there has been discussion about school choice. And we do have school choice, but what the delegates are talking about is money following the child. And so the way the legislative priority regarding that piece is written is, that is great if we can come up with a way to do it, as long as there is no government oversight, no strings attached. And that is the really, really important little part of that. Because the last thing that we want to do is infringe on homeschool parents' ability and rights to homeschool their child without having to have their curriculum approved or some sort of test take or anything else that would impede their ability to educate their child in the way they want to. Let me take a question at the end. Hang on to that. Please do. So that the priority language on that is real important. And if you're curious about the priority language, it's longer this session. So I didn't make a slide with all of the language on it, but it is at our website, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes. Then the other piece about parental rights is making sure that education is free of any social theories. And that little sentence implies no CRT, no gender ideologies, no Marxism, no, crazy, whatever that stuff is. So that's the other piece of that priority, and that language gives us the ability to work on that this session. All right. Real quickly, what happened with the rules debate? Is there anybody who doesn't know how that went down? I won't spend a lot of time, or do you know how, with the dim chairs and the rules debate, how that happened? How many of y'all were in Austin? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so there's some of you who don't know. Okay, so I'm going to real quickly just tell you. We were hoping for a rule change that would prohibit the speaker from putting minority members in leadership positions or as chairman of House committees. What happened was they didn't want to do, I'm just going to tell you the truth. They didn't want to do that. So they had a plan to thwart that on the House floor. And the way they did it was there were a couple of Republican members who proposed something called a housekeeping resolution that prohibits using House resources for political purposes. Okay, that sounds like something we'd all agree on, right? That's very benign. So it passed without any debate, without any objection. But then when the amendment came for Representative Slayton, he rolled out his amendment that says minority party members should be prohibited from holding committee chairmanships. Representative Charlie Guerin called a point of order and said it was counter to that housekeeping resolution they just passed. Well, that's a really silly objection, because in the House we have the Republican caucus, we have the Democrat caucus, we have political parties identified in the House. So that just didn't make sense. However, Speaker Phelan sustained the objection and so therefore would not allow a vote on Speaker Phelan's amendment. So not only were you and I, we were denied opportunity to see our representatives debate on the merits of having Democrats as chairs, and they could have done that. They could have debated back and forth. Here are the pros, here are the cons. But we didn't get to see that debate, nor did we get a vote. So we know that quite a few of the reps said that they would have voted against it, but it's real easy to say you're going to vote for something or not vote for something when you don't actually have to take a vote, right? So we don't know. So we didn't get the benefit of seeing that. And that's not, to me, that's not a real good democratic process. And that's the correct use of the word democratic, right? We did have 6 brave Republican reps sign an appeal to override the ejection of the chair. So they wanted debate, they wanted a vote. And those were Representatives Tinderholt, Slayton, DeRosio, Hayes, Schlatzline, and Harrison. they needed 10 in order to override the chair, and they could only get 6. So if they had only had 4 more Republican representatives, then we could have gotten debate and a vote. I would have really liked to have seen debate and a vote. And we may have lost that vote, but at least we would have had debate and a vote, right? But we didn't get that. So that's why parliamentary procedure, knowing parliamentary procedure is incredibly important. And I will say that we do have some reps who said they didn't know they had to get over there and sign this sheet of paper. And maybe they didn't, and some of our new ones probably didn't know that. The freshmen, yeah. But he who knows the rules, rules, right? And so we were outsmarted on parliamentary procedure in the way this went down. So that's important. But you know what? For me, the real win for the week was, in the vote, the rules debate happened on Wednesday. We had asked all of the grassroots groups to come to Austin, and we picked Thursday. We were thinking maybe rules debate would be on Thursday because last session it was on Thursday, but we knew it was a guess, so we weren't real married to the fact that they were going to have rules debate or not. But what we wanted to do was show up and let our representatives know that we supported them in voting for or supporting no DIN chairs. And so we asked all our grassroots groups to come down. We had at least 10 chartered buses. We had vans. We had caravans. We filled, look at the galley. The galley is completely full. They weren't letting anybody else in. And there you can see the line in the hallway of people trying to get into the gallery. And we asked folks just to go to their rep's office and watch things, or to let their rep know how they felt about the DIN chairs. But for me, this was success for the voters because we showed up in a big way. And I think it's important that we do that on a very regular basis because when our guys take the votes that we want, we need to be there to support them and thank them and appreciate them. And when they're taking risky votes, we need to let them know that we have their back. That if they take a risky vote, we're going to tell people back in the district and say, hey, our rep did a really good thing, and please support them for that. And then when they don't do what we ask, we need to let folks know that too, because we're not being represented fairly, right? Or the way that we thought we were going to be. And so for all those reasons, we need to be down there as much as we can, or at least communicating with people who go. And I'll tell you that in just a minute. And I'm watching my time, Matt. It's 8 o'clock already. Okay, I'm going to hurry really quickly.
Keep going.
Okay.
If anybody needs to go.
Okay, yeah. All right. So real fast, if you are not familiar with our TexasGOP.org website, I would ask you to take out your phone, and I want to just really quickly walk you through it because we've got great resources, and I want you to know how to find them. So if you go to TexasGOP.org, pull that up on your phone, and I'm going to do it with you while you're doing it. So it's TexasGOP.org, and it will look like this, just like the screenshot. Then if you click on the little hamburger menu in the right-hand corner, you will get this. I took the screenshot on my desktop, or my laptop. This is what it looks like on your mobile device. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom on your phone, you will see hashtag TXLEGE. Click on that, and you'll get a whole bunch of red things. The very first thing is a list of our legislative priorities. You'll get the full priority language. You will also get the SREC person who is the sub-chair for that committee. So if you're really interested in election integrity, then Debbie Duke's email address is on there, and you can contact her and find out how you can help. The next thing that we have is an LP-approved bill list. Part of the job of my committee, the Legislative Parties Committee, is we look at all the bills that have been filed for our 8 priorities. And we go through and sort those bills, and the ones that meet our legislative priority language, we approve those as a committee for bills that we're going to advocate for. And let me say, there's lots of other great bills that may get filed, and there's other important things like medical freedom. We've actually got a little stealth committee that kind of works on that because we believe it's so important, but it's not totally official, but we think it's so critical. So not every good bill is going to be on our list, but the good bills we believe that meet the priority language will be on there. And so we have started a list of those approved bills. It is not at all exhaustive yet. They have until February 10th, I think, to file bills. So we will keep adding to that as time goes on and those bills get filed. How many of you have gotten my legislative priorities report in the past? Oh, good, a few. Okay, so I put out a report, and sometimes it's weekly during session. Lately, it hasn't been so weekly, but I've done 3 so far, and I'll try to do one next week. But I try to keep you updated on what's happening with the legislative priorities during session, so you can sign up for that email, and that is on there. We have got a legislative priorities Facebook group, if you like to keep up that way. And then if you've never written an email to your rep, I created a little sample template, so you can get an idea of how to write something. We will also be having some talking points for all our legislative priorities added to this. We've got hard copy papers. I just haven't had the website guy add them yet, but they will be on here. So like if you want to write your rep something about banning gender modification, you can look at our 3 talking points and pick one of those out and then add whatever you want to say personally and send that email. We're just trying to make it really, really easy for you. Campaign finance. This is an interesting thing that we added last session. If you want to follow the money, and if you want to know who donates to your rep, and that's always a good thing to know, because that does influence the decisions and votes that your rep often takes. You can look that up, and this link will take you away from the party website. It'll say, going to another website, are you sure you want to do that? You say yes. And it will take you to Transparency USA, which can give you some of that information. All right, so we've got great resources on the party website. Your action items, these are just some, easy ones. Share information about our legislative parties with friends, with your church groups, whatever. These are obvious ones. Email your reps. Let others in your district know what your representative and senator are doing in Austin. This one I want to come back to in just a second. But then the last one is work with grassroots leaders in your districts as they coordinate campaigns for these priorities with your SREC. So our first big grassroots campaign we did was the No Dim Chairs one and going to Austin. And so, Jerry will always give you the information on what we're doing in terms of our big organized campaigns. And I hope we can do one for every one of our legislative priorities where we have an advocacy day and we bring the buses in and we go and we visit the offices. We have to be a little more flexible for committee meetings because we only get 3 days notice on when committee meetings are held. So those may need to be carpools for people who are interested in going to see those committee meetings and seeing bills heard. But we hope you will participate. But Jerry will be, your information for those big campaigns. But I do want to tell you something else that I'm really hoping districts will do. And I'm calling this the district grassroots teams. What I am hoping is that every House district and every Senate district will organize a little team of people who actually have the time and flexibility to go to Austin on a regular basis. And I know that everybody cannot do that, but if you are retired or you own your own business or just in a particular season of life where you have the ability and time, I really encourage you to consider donating your time, or I consider what I do my ministry, right? This is ministry, because I pay to do what I do. So if you're in that season, consider being on this team. And what I would like for these teams to do is to divide up the legislative priorities so you're not trying to do too much, but get to know your representative and your senator and their staff. And go meet with them when you're in Austin. And to meet with the rep, you'll have to call and make an appointment. But with their staff, you can just walk in the office. Get to know who they are. Begin taking them information on our various legislative priorities that you're advocating for. Give them reason to pass or to vote yes or to fight for the bills. Let them know why election integrity is so critical right now. Let them know that, you know what, in Houston, a lot of our polling locations didn't even get paper ballot. They didn't get the ballots. They ran out of paper. In Dallas, we had all kinds of machine malfunctions. The poll pads they went crazy and numbers were not making sense and numbers didn't reconcile at the end of the night. So they need that kind of information before we make an ask like passing a bill that really changes things in a big way. So provide that information to them. And then look at the committee that your rep or your senator serves on. Make a list of those committees, and then look at what priority bills get assigned to that committee. And you can get that info. We're going to provide that on the Texas GOP website. So then if you know the bills and you know the committees, then begin to attend the committee hearings and encourage your rep to fight for those bills in those committee hearings, and to encourage that chairman to bring the bill up for a vote. And so I'm hoping that if we do these things in our districts, both in the Senate and in the House, we can have higher success with getting our priorities passed. Now, the most important part of this is those folks who go to Austin must come back and give that information to the Republican voters in your district. If you've got a rep who's doing a fantastic job fighting for our legislative priorities, those voters need to know, because you want that person back next session. You want to work hard for them. If you have a rep who is not fighting for legislative priorities, then your voters need to know that's fair game. That's fair information. But the key to us getting change, positive change in Austin, is educating our Republican voters. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you've got a little team who's willing to do that, and then write up a little mini legislative priority report on your rep, like I do for the state. You do it just for your district or your Senate district, your House district or your Senate district. Then email it out. Email it to your precinct chairs. Email it to your club presidents. Let them disseminate that information, and we're going to have a much more educated voting populace. And I think the key to saving our nation and our state are educated voters. Because it's only when we're educated that we can hold our elected officials accountable and let them know what we expect of them. And that's only fair. You know, if we don't know, then they can't know if we don't communicate, and we have to have good communication with them. So always start trying to establish good communications. We always want to go in kind and diplomatic and bring lots and lots of carrots, and not have to use a stick. I really don't like using a stick. But sometimes you may have to, but we want to try to work with them as much as possible. So, bringing us back to the very beginning, I think we must be people of integrity. We must be righteous, and we must speak the truth. Because what happened in Germany was Christians did not speak out, and they did not speak truth. And so if we are going to survive as a nation and not fall to communism, we have to tell the truth in everything. And we have to tell it loud. And we have to be winsome. But we also have to be brave and courageous, because we will be attacked. So thank you all so much. I am happy to take questions. Thank you for letting me go.